Okay, morning folks. Welcome to the Global Power Platform Bootcamp UK edition. Firstly, apologies for running this on a working day. I know everybody also has work to go to, and hopefully you've maybe got us on in the background as well as getting some work done. The Global Power Platform Bootcamp is the February 18th and 19th, and unfortunately, I happen to be moving house this weekend. So Friday it is. So all of these sessions will be available on YouTube, but just look at who's managed to show up despite the fact that we're recording this on a Friday. Look at the faces that we've got here and the presenters. So thank you so much to everybody for taking part and really jumping in and helping the community out to put on the only UK Global Power Platform Bootcamp event. So without further ado, let's just move on and I'll introduce you to me. So I'm your host today. So in case we haven't met, that's a crying shame and we should get on and do that. So reach out to me on all of these social things. So I'm Sharon Sumner. So I'm one of the leads of the Cambridge Power Platform user group, and one of our first speakers is also one of the new leads of the Cambridge Power Platform group as well. I'll introduce you to him in a moment. So I'll be around all day. So in the background of all of these sessions, I'll be here, I'll answer questions, I'll interrupt the speakers because that's what I do. So that we make sure that everybody is getting their voice heard through the chat, and make sure that the presenters are getting some good feedback as and when it happens, if they're busy presenting and not necessarily looking at the screen. So I'll be your moderator. If we can keep the questions in chat, that really helps. And throughout the day, as I say, please let's have some chat going on that chat channel, and keep the thing light and airy and moving along. So obviously today what we're going to do is we're going to be recording all of the speakers so that we can put that live on YouTube. There will be events going on around the world, so expect to see lots of YouTube videos coming out over the coming few days, and we'll be prepping those up next week or in the next week or two. We've got quite a lot of speakers to get through. Housekeeping, please be respectful in your comments or in your questions. If we permit you to come off mic, please be respectful to the speakers that have given up their time for the day. And that's all I'm going to say on that, because I think it's a given. We're a community and we work together. These guys have spent their time to come and pass on their knowledge and help show you some cool stuff that they've done in these apps. So it's really important that we respect the speakers and also the guests. So thank you everybody for coming along. Here's our agenda for the day. So what are we looking at? First up, the amazing Sancho Harker, who we can all see up there, hopefully, at the top of the screen. He's ready to go first. Sancho is Microsoft MVP, as are most of the speakers today, and will be sharing with us some of the stuff he's been doing on the amazing theming tools in Power Apps. Really worth seeing this session. I think this is probably the first session since version 3, so we're super lucky to have Sancho kicking off the day. We've got a session with Shane Young. This is a pre-recorded slot that he's done for us that we'll play for you at 10:30. We're going to move on to Serge and Isabel. Governance, really important topic. Sorry, skip forward. We've got Thomas, we've got Nick coming along from Microsoft to share with us some Power Apps Portals session. We've then got Daniel, Marcin, Elizabeth. I mean, the names just go on. We've got loads and loads of people throughout the day. So it's going to be a really packed day. As you can see, we've got very few breaks, but again, don't worry. If there's a session that you want to see, we'll have that recorded and we'll notify you once we've put all those up on YouTube. So keep a lookout on the CAMS PPUG channel on my YouTube. So thank you. All of the sessions will be on YouTube. So let's get started, because we've got loads to get through, and like I say, very few breaks unless the speakers happen to end early. So first up, we have the amazing Sancho. Now, Sancho started working with me about a month or so ago, so starting to get to know him extremely well. But first met Sancho a couple of years ago and actually offered him a job on the spot, which was interesting. Because there's no brain like this guy. So Sancho, I'm going to hand over to you to talk through your Power App solution and let you introduce yourself a little bit.
Thanks, Sharon. Let me just take over there. Okay, hey everyone, so I'm Sancho, Microsoft MVP, Power Apps Champ, Power Apps Forum, super user, blah, 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 blah. Look at the aka.ms/meet-sancho link later on. Don't watch it, don't look at it now. And I've got a few other links there. We'll be posting links afterwards, so don't worry about the links now. So what I'm going to be covering today is theming. Now, there's quick ways and there's long ways to do it, and there's a lot that can go wrong. So why did I do this? Basically, I was spending so much time tweaking every little control inside the apps that I was building, and I worked out, okay, there's about 2.5 million of us, more now, Power Apps developers, and if we only ever spent 1 hour in our entire career doing this, we'd collectively be spending over 13,000 years just doing this templating, and that's absolutely insane. So there had to be a better way to do that, and there is always a better way to do things. Additionally, there's some accessibility things that aren't really there in the current Power Apps IDE that you can't do without going through a lot of effort. So what I did was probably what everyone else did. There's a few ways you probably go through before you end up at a solution like this. And the one is like you create a theme table and then you use references to that table on all of your objects. But again, then you're setting that property on every object you create, which again, time waste, massive time waste. You can create a screen full of pre-formatted controls where you've done all of that, what we just did, and copy paste those, but then you're assuming and hoping that your users are, or your clients or whoever you're making this for are going to be copy pasting, and let's be honest, they probably won't because they'll forget. Or you could create what we call a duplicate reference screen, and that's where you create one screen with all your controls, then a second screen that references all of those controls, and then you copy paste those controls, and any changes you make to the original set will then be reflected. The problem with this is once you reference a certain number of controls in your app to other controls, they stop working. I think it's like 1,500, but you reach that limit pretty quick. So what I did, let's go back, is figure out a better way to do this. So here I've got a basic app just with a date picker. Why a date picker? Because it's still the one thing you can't do properly as theming. So you're all familiar with this date picker. You can change some basic colors for it, but if we look at the list of properties, there's certain things missing, because if you change any of these, let's go with icon background to like green. Fine, that changes to green, but there's no way to actually change this, the header or the color picker. So once you've themed your whole app, you're still stuck with this blue monstrosity. Then what you can do, there's other ways, obviously, that you can choose one of these themes, but then you're locked in. So if I choose this dark blue theme, I can theme all my other items, but effectively this will always look like this. So I thought, no, there has to be a better way to do this. So I saved a copy of the app locally and then went exploring. So it turns out that each .ms app file is actually just a zip. It's a container with various items inside it. So you can take a tool like 7-zip or WinZip and actually open it up and see that it's got various items inside it. So if we extract that out into a folder, here we go. You've got a bunch of different items. Now the thing I wanted to look at was the list of controls, because obviously we're trying to skin this date picker control. So open up this number one. Now number one, when you view it, is the app. It's the app itself as a container. So these are all structured in JSON format, which is basically just parents and children. So your app is like your parent container, the controls are the children from that, and then their children, the screens, sorry, are the children of the app, and then children of the screen are the actual controls. So there's some stuff you can change here. We're not going to focus on this. We're going to go straight to the 3, which will be the screen. You may notice here I'm using a plugin called Beautify. It just auto formats things for a bunch of different functions. It saves a lot of time and makes it much easier to view. So we can see this is screen 1. And if we scroll down a bit, we can see children. And in that children is date picker 1. Now, there's a bunch of different things we can change here. Again, I'm not going to go through all of that because I can spend 4 hours doing this. But there are some important things that I picked up early on, which is, for example, this calendar header fill. Now that property is not actually surfaced, even though it exists, in the actual IDE. So you can't edit this except by doing it this way, which is really frustrating. So if I change this to, let's change it to some really horrific color and save that. Then, now what I was doing before is I was using a zip tool to like drag it back into the zip, but you can actually do that a lot quicker now with literally 2 lines of PowerShell. And that PowerShell code is literally just, it's these 2, compress archive with the destination contents and then rename it from a zip to a .ms app. I mean, effectively, it's really just 1 line and then you just rename it. So don't worry too much about that. This PowerShell script is available on my GitHub. I'll have links to all that at the end. But what we've got here is an MS app file that I have renamed twice, an MS app file. So if I go back into here and open that up, so what we should see now is, there we go. So perfect, but the header has been changed. Now, obviously, this is crazy. Who in their right mind is going to be going through and doing this for every control? Well, me. Me, so that none of you have to do it yourselves. That was the whole point. I was going to made this template so that no one else has to do that ever again, because it's not just that property. There's a bunch of other properties on several other controls that you just cannot get to except via the backend code. So then I figured out a way to set those to variables in the backend code so that when you're back inside Power Apps, you can actually just set those variables and off it goes and reskins your whole app. So now what I've done is that's gone through 3 iterations. Now the first one was really simple. It's just choose 3 colors and it'll skin it for you like the theme button here does. Just you don't have any control. The second one, I had a few extra controls. And then now in the 3rd version, I have almost every design property. And I say almost because the 2 things I haven't done are padding and font weight. Font weight's coming soon, but padding, because there's 4 properties per control and there's like 28 controls, it adds 125 plus, just a ridiculous number of places I have to then set these variables and checks, and it can cause a performance impact when there's that many extra. So anyway, this is the basic template. So you've got your loading screen. Your loading screen is something really important for apps because you don't want to pull all your data during your on start. That's a really bad tactic because then your users just end up seeing a twirling loading preloader for Power Apps before they actually get into the app. The idea is you get them in the app as soon as humanly possible, and then you distract them with this loading bar while it's actually loading things in the background. It's a much better user experience, and I have only had positive responses about it. So the idea here is I have gone and done all the legwork behind the scene to make it easy for you to change all of this. So in the app on start, we set some basic quick variables that take less than a second, so it does not impact your load time to getting to the screen. And they basically just are 3 colors and the corresponding text that contrast correctly for those colors. Then a basic font size, and whether or not that theme is dark mode. Now, I can go in and change these, and it will change the app immediately. But what this means is if I put in a new screen and insert a bunch of controls, notably a date picker, and let's go back to the app on start, and let's change things around a bit. Let's make that like 34, 129. And we run our on start. Everywhere that color is used has been changed. Now, again, you might be thinking, okay, well, that's still not great. It's not a great experience. The date picker is still blue, although you might notice that the date picker has 2 different blues. So that was the problem I found with version 2 of the template, is that you had some control but not enough. Well, you're basically got Thanos levels of power here. It's from controls theme. So let's go, okay, you set the basic theme, then you set the different font sizes. So you have a basic font size you set in the theme, and then you have additional font sizes. You can add or remove multiples to here. These are just the basics I've given, where they've got slightly different sizes based on that original font size. And then you have this thing called controls theme. And this is quite literally every control that is able to be design edited and properties changed to do with design. And you can actually just set it to whatever you want. So if I, for example, want every default button to now come out with white text and a brown fill, and I run my on start, there we go. And every new button I insert will be exactly the same. So that's how easy it should be. That's how easy it should be for us as makers to set these defaults, because it's crazy that you have to go through this whole back-end method, or you have to set everything individually. My idea is you set it once and you're done. So you set all of these as you would like them. Like maybe your company wants a border color that is, you know, blue for your buttons, or you have a particular design style that I don't think I changed that. Border color. I did not change that. I changed the wrong thing. Okay. There we go. Right. So say you have a particular look that your company is going for. You can set all of that on a control by control basis for every control. And the power of that is immense, because you basically create one template for your company or for your particular client that you're building this for, and then they can use that to make every other app going forward, and everything they insert will always be in the brand colors that you have set and created during this initial creation phase. No matter who uses it, no matter what level they are, if they're going to insert a button, it will always have whatever you have initially set. So that is hugely powerful. And there's some things here that you can't actually change normally. So the date picker, for example, you can do date picker, the hover date, the header fill, the selected date fill. So let's get selected date fill of like yellow, and header fill of and let's get that going. So there's that. And then you can also default things like the fonts. So let's say I want font dot, what's it called, dancing script? Yeah, dancing script, that's the one. Okay, let's rerun that. You can now see that we have the cursive font inside the date picker. So that's all very cool. Fine. Now, what I really wanted to show is there's a few ways to do this, and one of them is, okay, so this way you can actually change the theme on the fly. So if I go into this theme palette page and pick a random one and go back to that screen I was on, done. So the concept is you could basically set or store a theme that a particular user prefers and have it pull it in when it starts up, instead of, or maybe you have certain divisions in your company and you only want this division to see these colors and that division to see another set of colors. You can do that as conditional logic now when the app starts up. So for example, if there's a certain type of button that you want only finance to see, you could actually write that conditionally here, or, you know, the possibilities really are endless. So once, let me go back to a default theme. So the other thing is accessibility. So I have here, it's a single button toggle, instant dark mode, instant colorblind safe mode, just one click. And that's in a component. And if you want to, you can just go into that component, look for set accessible theme, and just take that code and use it on whatever button you want. You don't have to use my component specifically. The code's all there. The same with, let's go out of that. The same with the font sizing. If I want to change the font size while the app is running for every font, because I've based all the fonts off that base font, I can actually just set on a button that if a user needs bigger fonts, for example, they've got low vision issues, or they can just make it bigger for themselves. Yeah. Okay, so what happened was I built this, the original version, then I built the second version, then Microsoft became aware of or interested in this, and so I spoke to Mehdi Slawi, who's a really cool guy, and I showed him how I was doing this, and they then went away and created the theming component for the Center of Excellence Starter Toolkit. And there's a few differences between my version and their version. My version is data source agnostic and non-premium, so you can attach it to whatever data source you want, SQL, Dataverse, Microsoft Lists, whatever it might be. And there's no license requirement, whereas theirs is fully based on Dataverse, so you have to license everyone who uses an app built off of that. So overriding specific colors. So for example, if I want a particular theme to have, let's go down here. So this example theme, and I've put comments throughout so you can follow what I'm doing. I'm always make sure to do that. It's got the basics that we saw initially, and then you can add whatever other property you want as an override per theme. So I have made this override example theme here where you can see, okay, it's horrific looking, but it makes the point that you can override things like the border radiuses, the fonts, the colors, default forms. Now, this is a big one as well, because you can't do that no matter how you try in the IDE. You can't default forms to look or feel a certain way. Well, now you can. So there's a few ways to, I think I've got 5-10 minutes left. Is that right, Sharon?
Yeah, we've also got a few questions for you there in the chat.
Ooh. Okay.
Do you want me to read them to you, or?
Yeah, actually, if you wouldn't mind grabbing one or two, I'll answer all of them after this, but
Sure. So first one is it possible for a citizen developer to do with no admin access?
Yeah. This is a standalone MS app. You can open this up from the free Power Apps license on any tenant. There's no requirement for any administrative action whatsoever. You open this up. Once you've done your changes to it, you hit save as, and then that's it. And then you say, maybe you want to save a copy to your computer to share with colleagues. Fine, you do that, and you just send it to them, and they do the same thing. They go open, browse for that file, and use it. There's no requirement for any kind of admin ability or control.
Awesome. And also, can it handle different buttons? I think the thinking there is that we would have like 3 different styles of buttons in the same app.
Yes, but not as a default, because of the way Power Apps is structured. When you go insert button, there is only one object as far as they're concerned, called button. But you could do what I mentioned in the beginning, which is create a sort of reference screen where you create 3 different types of button that have different logic on them, and then use those throughout the app.
Okay. Madge has just qualified. She said she was referring to the changing the back colouring in the files. So that's when you were doing the code, I guess.
Yeah, so I've tried, believe me, I've tried. The way that IDE interprets that design file, the JSON structure, is very fixed. You can try, and I did try, add a whole bunch of other properties. It only picks up the properties that it has been set to pick up. So you can only define one type of button as far as they're concerned. There are other types of buttons that are involved when you create a new screen. So you could theoretically change a few bits. There are certain types of buttons that are used in these other screens, but if you change them, then those screens will reflect that change. So, for example, let me bring this up.
I think, yeah, it's this part, Sancho. It's the JSON in the background that I think Madge is referring to.
So yeah, that's what I'm.
Yeah.
When you do this, it search for a button and go from the top. So there are each thing, like a import is technically a button. That's how it has an onSelect. A barcode scanner has a button, and then default microphone style we see here, and we get back up to the buttons themselves. So yeah, we have these obscure referenced ones called reserved cancel button style, reserved OK, cancel button, default button style. That is, there is only one of these, and you can add as many as you want. When you open it in Power Apps, the editor only picks up the one called default button style, because on their end they've programmed it to look for that. So there's a limit to what you can do in terms of multiple buttons there, because you're limited by what properties they're looking for.
Yep. Luke, is it possible to give Madge the ability to speak to us directly? I think there's some clarifying questions that she'd like to ask.
Sorry for the confusion. The question was actually, can I change the color in the files when I'm a citizen developer? I don't want to make extra buttons. Okay. I'm just thinking about all the work that you've done. Can I do that as a citizen developer?
Yeah, absolutely. You literally follow exactly what I've done through here, where you go in and change this. So you'll change, let's go back down to default button, you'll change this property, right? It's currently set to palette dot whatever. Palette is what it.
How do I load it back to Power Apps?
So once you've made all of this, you reconstitute it with this little script, and that makes this .msapp file, which is what I was doing earlier. And then from there, you just go into
and import it.
And just, no, you don't even have to import. You just go File, Open, and then browse for a local file.
Oh,
and then
nice.
You can open up that.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Perfect, thanks. We also had some other questions, which you may have answered actually. With the controls theme, do you have to put all the properties, e.g. label, text, color, or can you just add one property?
So this is why I've predefined all of them to begin with. They're already there. If you want to override any one of them, by all means. So this has to stay in its current form. So the structure has to be there. But let's say you're only interested in changing labels. You don't have to change anything else. Just change the properties you want to change, and the rest will theme like a default theme. So if I use this default theme, that's what I've been changing when I changed the onStart. I changed what the basic items were. So if I'm not interested in changing anything else, I can just change the properties I want to override.
Cool. Got quite a few more. Oh, Damien. Hi, Damien. How you doing? Good to see you on the call. Damien says he's implemented this on a Canvas app in part, and it means that every control he inserts will adopt this theming out of the box using the global variables. He didn't do it on all the properties for the controls, which he regrets. And then goes on to a question of, have you noticed any extra properties creep in over time?
There were one or two after version 2, which is why I included them in version 3. But it was a very small number of them, because the design properties are the ones that Power Apps will pick up. There's a few other non-design properties, like when they switched from Z index to tab index and things like that. You can't change those by default. They're not considered a design property. Whereas everything in this sort of section and these color variables, those are considered design properties. Because I did try. I was trying to go for beginning day of the week and a few other bits for the date picker. I think I even mentioned it here. Yeah, start of week, the format, the language. I tried to get all of these to work, but unfortunately, I'm limited by what they will allow to be picked up as well.
Okay. Good question from Eric. What's the overhead for loading time using the theming approach compared to a regular Power App?
Almost indistinguishable. I've used this on some very, very large apps with a large number of controls. I'll tell you what actually happens is because you're pointing them to a variable, which is a static item as far as Power Apps is concerned, it's very quick. Where I did see a performance impact was when what I was doing before, which was pointing them all to another control, because what that actually means is when you go look at button 1's fill, what that button is actually doing is every few milliseconds it is checking what button 1's fill is. It's not a it's not determined outright. When you say I want this one, button 4, to look at button 1 dot color, right? That will constantly check what button 1's color is, so that if you change this color to, then it automatically changes there. But what that means is every other control you've based that on is doing that same lookup, and then eventually it ends up being hundreds, sometimes even thousands of lookups to a small number of controls, and that causes performance overhead. Why I moved to this variable method from that method was because of that. So once you're doing it against a variable, or you could also do it against a collection. So you don't have to set a global variable, you could set a collection. Hint, that's kind of what I'm doing on the version 4. because then you can patch it individually, row by row. So that's something I'm working on at the moment. But yeah, in terms of pointing to a variable, the performance is very, very minimal impact. I have not noticed anything on any of the larger apps I've built.
So you've actually solved that impact problem rather than creating it.
Yeah. Because what people generally do is they have a button and then they reference that other button, so that they have a screen full of predetermined controls. But as you make more and more of those, you got more, like the number of references and lookups, because that's basically what it's doing. It's just constantly looking up, is that value, is that value, is that value, and that can eventually, I've actually crashed the editor quite a few times.
So I think, Robert, that also answers your question about performance over multiple screens. So that just leaves us with Melissa, who is saying, is the information on forms online somewhere? I'm really interested in that, and we're almost at time.
Yes. The properties, it's actually really straightforward because I've renamed a lot of them. So where they have some obscure name in the actual backend file, I've renamed those to edit form border color, edit form fill, view form border color, view form fill, and the form title label font. Those are currently the only properties you can really edit from that, because the forms actually just use normal controls inside them. So everything aside from those will be based on whatever other defaults you've set for controls. So if you've already set a label, like a text input to look a certain way, it'll use that.
Perfect. I think that's all the questions that we've got, Sancho, although I'm pretty sure everybody could keep piling on and keep asking questions.
Okay, so I've got some resources here. I will post them in the chat after, so don't worry about that. Then there's a I've been very inspired by moving roles to work at Business Cloud Integration, and it's inspired me to do work outside of work again. And so version 4 is coming. And I'll give you a super quick sneak peek here. Revamped home screen, revamped loading screen, slick, modern, clean, configurable loading screen, some table view type screens with different logos. Anyway, so that's all you get.
Love it. Thank you very much. That's really good stuff. I mean, thanks for sharing that with us, and delighted that your new role is getting your mojo back, especially as it's with me. So completely selfish.